Nobody was supposed to hear this story. Nobody was supposed to know his name. And nobody was ever meant to connect Meghan Markle to the life she buried before the crowns, before the cameras, before Prince Harry. But the silence cracked, and when it cracked, it didn't whisper. It detonated. Because long before the palace, long before royalty, there was a marriage that vanished, a husband erased, and a family that disappeared to protect a secret that could destroy everything. And it all starts in Chicago.
Meghan Markle's childhood summer boyfriend is speaking out in support of the Duchess of Sussex just ahead of her third wedding.
Looking at some old pics of her and her ex, a lot of people are starting to think so.
Everyone's just like, what? That first kiss? How'd that come about?
She's the one that made the move. I think it was probably a situation.
Chicago 1994, way before the fame, the acting career, and the high-profile marriage, there was a relationship that got completely erased. A husband nobody's supposed to know about, and a child left behind in the shadows while her mother chased the spotlight. This is the story the Giuliano families kept silent for 30 years, and it's all about to unravel. Joe Giuliano wasn't chasing Hollywood. He wasn't chasing cameras. He wasn't chasing status. He was a regular guy from Chicago, raised on loyalty, tradition, and the belief that when you commit for life. A man who thought love meant roots, not runways. And then Meghan walked into his world. She didn't just enter, she took over.
Slowly, unease began to settle in.
Put it it's good to go.
He wanted what his parents had, a stable home, a family, roots that went deep, and then he meets Meghan. The connection hit hard and fast. This wasn't slow. This wasn't careful. This was reckless, intoxicating, consuming. The kind of chemistry that blinds you to warning signs. The kind that makes you believe fate is happening instead of danger approaching. They didn't ask the hard questions. They didn't talk about the future. They just chased the feeling. And that decision would haunt everyone involved.
Ex haven't exactly been kind. Several people accused her of being fake and putting on a performance for the world.
They didn't go the traditional route. Instead, they packed their bags and hit Vegas. Quick ceremony, neon lights, fake flowers, Elvis music somewhere in the background, no families, no witnesses who mattered, no roots being planted. Just vows exchanged under flickering lights. Vows Joe took as sacred and Meghan treated like a stepping stone.
Meghan wasn't looking for roots, she was looking for wings. Joe's parents grew suspicious when details of her...
It was intimate, it was rushed, and honestly, it was the first hint that this whole thing wasn't going to last. For Joe, that chapel was the beginning of forever. For Meghan, it was a temporary stop on the way to something bigger. Hollywood was calling, and Chicago was already shrinking in her rearview mirror.
Them attends an event solo. Then he asked,
So is that a good thing for you in a way that there's so much interest in you?
It was more like a brief stop along the way to the life she really wanted, Hollywood fame. A world that didn't include Sunday dinners in Chicago. Joe's family saw it before Joe did. They were old school, Italian-American, family first, reputation guarded, problems handled behind closed doors. And Meghan didn't fit. Everything stayed internal. You protected the family reputation above all else. When Meghan first entered this world, she burst in like an explosion of light. She dazzled them at first. She knew how to charm, how to perform, how to become whoever the room required. But performances crack when watched long enough. Joe's mother noticed the inconsistencies, the shifting timelines, the stories that never stayed the same twice. There were holes in her stories, the story kept changing, it felt less like getting to know a real person and more like being sold a character. Chicago was never the destination. It was an obstacle. Every conversation circled back to auditions, Los Angeles, fame, and you can't build a marriage with someone who's already planning their escape. Everything circled back to auditions, to Los Angeles, to the spotlight she believed was destined for her. Holidays were skipped, birthdays missed. An empty chair became a message. Joe tried to hold it together, torn between loyalty to his family and devotion to his wife. But you can't split yourself in half forever. The whole energy in the house transformed. What began as open and inviting became strained and awkward. The marriage was already collapsing when the news came, the kind of news that usually saves relationships. But this time, it detonated them. Meghan was pregnant, and instead of joy, there was panic. No celebrations, no announcements, no hope, because a child didn't fit into the future Meghan had already chosen. Behind closed doors, conversations turned cold and strategic. This wasn't about love anymore, it was about damage control. Joe was preparing to become a father while watching his wife prepare to disappear, and that's where the story turns dark. Because what happened next didn't just erase a marriage, it erased an entire life. The pregnancy didn't save the marriage, it exposed it. Because when the question became stay or go, Meghan didn't hesitate. She calculated. A child meant responsibility. Chicago meant limits. And neither fit the future she had already chosen. The conversations behind closed doors weren't emotional, they were surgical, quiet, precise. Every word weighed, every option stripped of sentiment. Joe was thinking about cribs and names. Meghan was thinking about exits and timelines. Two people in the same room planning completely different lives. The Giulianos believed family meant sacrifice. You didn't run when things got hard. You didn't abandon your own blood. The idea of walking away from a child wasn't even a concept in their world. But Meghan laid it out plainly. She could not be a mother in Chicago and an actress in Hollywood. Those lives could not coexist. One had to be erased, and the choice had already been made. Joe was forced to process something no man is prepared for, preparing to meet his daughter while knowing the woman carrying her had no intention of staying. The betrayal wasn't loud, it was quiet, and that made it worse. While he was imagining first steps, she was forging connections that could move her career forward. While he was bracing himself for fatherhood, she was mentally packing her bags. And then the unthinkable solution emerged. The pregnancy would continue, but motherhood would not. The child would be born quietly. No announcements, no photos, no paper trail connecting Meghan to maternity. The Giulianos would raise the baby. They would provide the home. They would absorb the responsibility. And Meghan would walk away free. Free from marriage, free from parenthood, free from anything that could slow her ascent. It was an exchange that stunned everyone involved, but once agreed upon, there was no going back. The pregnancy disappeared from public view. No baby showers, no hospital visitors, no excited calls, just silence. When the baby arrived, Meghan didn't stay. She didn't linger. She didn't bond. She didn't look back. She left before the reality could anchor her. The Giulianos stepped in, not out of obligation to her, but out of protection for an innocent child who didn't choose any of this. They built a cover story, a niece, a cousin, a family situation no one was supposed to question. And it worked. Meghan's name never appeared on records. No photos surfaced, no trace connected her to motherhood. By the time the baby was settled, Meghan was already gone, physically and emotionally, chasing auditions, building a new identity, reshaping herself into someone the industry would accept. What she left behind wasn't just a child, it was devastation. Joe had lost his wife, his future, and the life he thought he was building, all while becoming a father without a partner. The Giulianos took on a burden that reshaped everything. And then came the next step. The marriage had to disappear, not fade, not dissolve quietly. It had to be erased. No former husband on record, no complicated history, no past that could follow her into casting rooms or interviews. The separation was handled privately, quickly, completely. There are whispers that money smoothed the process, but what mattered more was mutual silence. Everyone involved wanted the same outcome, this chapter gone forever. For years, the plan held. Meghan rebuilt herself. Northwestern University. A new polish, a new timeline. The Chicago years were scrubbed clean like they never existed. As far as the world was concerned, her story started later. Cleaner, simpler, more marketable. But you can't erase people. Joe stayed silent even as her profile exploded. Even as offers came. Even as revealing the truth could have changed his life overnight. He said nothing. The Giulianos said nothing. They raised the child quietly, shielding her from cameras, questions, and the chaos that would have followed. And as Meghan's fame grew, their fear grew with it, because attention brings scrutiny. So they did something drastic. They vanished. Not a slow move, not a public relocation. An abrupt disappearance. Lights off. Windows closed. Neighbors left with questions. They didn't just leave a house, they abandoned an entire life. Community. Friendships, stability. Why? Because exposure was coming. Journalists dig, history surface, and once the possibility of a hidden child exists, there is no end to the scrutiny. They chose isolation over intrusion, silence over spectacle. For 3 decades, they carried the secret. Meghan rose, television fame, global attention, a royal marriage watched by millions. Every detail of her life dissected, except the one that mattered most. Joe watched it all unfold and still said nothing. That level of restraint is rare, almost unheard of, but time erodes even the strongest silence. The child grew up, became an adult, started asking questions that couldn't be deflected forever. The explanations stopped adding up. Curiosity turned into insistence. And secrets like this don't age quietly. Digital records surface. Connections form. Truth pushes upward. Now the pressure is back, heavier than ever. A marriage erased. A child hidden. A family forced into exile. The polished public story doesn't include include Chicago. It doesn't include Joe Giuliano. It doesn't include the child left behind. But those omissions don't disappear. They wait. And now, after decades of silence, the foundations are cracking. Because when truth collides with ambition, something always breaks. And this story, the one never meant to exist, is finally pushing its way into the light. Someone always remembers. Always remembers. Always remembers.